issues that we've had this morning. But welcome. I'm excited about today's conversation. I've got two powerhouse CEOs in healthcare and also the data security and blockchain technology space. Jeff Marek, as Ebony said, of Synovient, the CEO, and also Chris Jones, CEO of MatchRite. So let's just jump right into the conversation. I want everybody to be interactive and informed about this amazing opportunity. I think the biggest piece of it is putting patients back in control of their data and empowering them to make profit off of that, but also do it in a secure manner using technology that's been around for the last decade or so, but it's now just coming to the forefront. So I'll kick it off to introduce the host and allow them to take a brief moment to introduce themselves, but also share a little bit about, what were your perspective thoughts when you were starting both companies? Did you envision sitting here today and talking about patients getting paid or accessing their medical records and then being able to use their getting paid for their medical data? So, Chris.
Yeah, so my story goes kind of back to my origin story is really trying to allow patients to have access to the medical records. There's not really a thought around the incentives that comes behind that. So us here talking about allowing patients to be able to use their medical records and use that and be able to incentivize records is very, empowering to me. Because the main goal for us is really to solve the basic problem is can we unify medical records into one unified portal? And us being able to work on that the last few years and now seeing some true utility to it is so important. And partnering with groups like Synovient and Jeff helps us see that the possibilities are endless, right? Once we solve that basic problem, unify the medical records. So us being here now is amazing. I think my origin story, some of you guys may know it, but I had a son diagnosed with cancer. And I always tell that story because at his diagnosis, they gave him 1 year to live. And we realized that in a year time frame that we missed a clinical trial because we didn't get his medical records in time. So, and along with unifying those medical records, it was always important to be able to connect patients to research facility because that is part of the full origin story of why we did it too. So I'm super excited to do it, super excited to get connected, and I think the future is really bright.
Jeff, same question. Did you envision when you started Synovian, did you envision being here today and partnering with MatchRite to move forward and take on this opportunity?
You're muted.
Let me unmute. So no, there's a lot of serendipity involved. My background and career is in technology. I spent 30 years at Intel, AT&T, and another number of other companies. And the last thing I worked on was artificial intelligence. And I've been around in technology long enough to know that technology can be used both for good and for nefarious purposes. And I looked at the things that are happening in the world right now, and I said, look, there's a lot of cool stuff that's coming out with AI, with connectivity. It's just a lot of fun stuff that's happening. And how do we use that to make our lives a little better? And in particular, everything right now is about data. Everything is interconnected. Everything you do, everywhere you go, all that stuff is happening online. And I don't look at it as a bad or a good thing. I look at it as look, you own information about you, but you can't own something if you don't have control of it. So how do we give people control of the information about them so they can make decisions? It's not good or bad to sell your data. It's your choice. If you want to sell it, you should be allowed to sell it. If you don't, you shouldn't, right? Just like if you own a car. So Synovian started on this vision to address the technology side of the problem. And, serendipity happened, met with Chris, and this is a fantastic place to engage. I mean, we're all patients effectively, right? My own family. So it's a place where we can make a difference. It's a place where it makes sense, and it's a place where there's a lot of market momentum.
So, Jeff, you went on and talked about ownership and control. Those are huge things. I know in the consumer space, they sell our data, they use our data, and we don't really have any really access or control. As you think about this and partner, what is it clear about the mission of ownership of your digital assets? It almost sounds philosophical. Talk to us about your background and how philosophical your philosophy on data ownership and being able to have share that data with securely.
Yeah, look, I try to put things in simple perspectives. Um, you don't own something if you can't control it and if you can't negotiate with it. So step one is, look, understand what's collected. Do you know what's collected about you? Let's give transparency into what information exists about you, and then give you a say in the creation and control of that data, and give you the opportunity to decide how it can be used. And it really is as simple as that. I'm a firm believer. most people actually don't want to steal your data. Most people are not evil. Most companies are not evil. They want to participate in an economy. They don't know how. They don't know how to ask you permission for your data. They don't know how to connect in a meaningful way. And I'm kind of putting it across the board in the entire industry. So to me, the challenge is providing the transparency, providing the tools and technology that let people do this connection and control their data, and doing it in a way that a human understands. It's a really complex technology and field. How do you
Mhm.
simplify that so that a normal business can actually engage in healthcare, engage in finding data? How does a researcher find a piece of data they want? It's that
So,
simple.
so Chris, I'm going to
Yep.
kick it back over to you. Simplistic terms. Jeff said transparency and clarity. Talk about MatchRite and what MatchRite does in the medical health record space, aggregating data from disparate systems, bringing it into one, bringing transparency and clarity back into the healthcare space.
Yeah, so it's been an interesting journey for us too over the last 6 years. Is really working directly with the EMR systems, the Cerner's, the Epics, the VAs of the world, really understand how those disparate systems operate independently. And our job was to unify those records and pull it into one location for the patient to be able to access it, but not only access those information, but understand it, right? And it looks the same for the patient, no matter where those records came from. So the journey for us has been really interesting, really trying to simplify that format, right? When the patients connect to these hospital systems, they pull their records out and they want to be able to make a common just data model, data group to where they understand each data set that comes out of that platform, and they can understand it and be able to share that information. Our goal was to really simplify just the records itself and to unify that. And we never really thought at the beginning of this that once you made the unification of the data model, what could happen outside of that. And we're learning that. I remember when I first started, I got this thing about Chris, you're boiling the ocean. Everybody's kind of doing it. Cerner's doing it. How you compete with Cerner and Epic and Meditech, all those EMR systems. But that was never our goal. Our goal was to get to this place here. It took us a while to kind of understand how to utilize it because we didn't really go where the revenue was. We went to where the opportunity was, right? Where the value was, and the value was really unifying those medical records and being able to have a conversation 6 years later with Jeff and say, all right, you know what? You have a secure component of this. We have the records that here. That's a utility that we can put in place to really put patient in control because it's beyond just access. There's access to medical records has been around for a while. The story of control of medical records have been kind of perforated throughout the ecosystem, the healthcare systems, but it's not really happening. We really wanted to be that outside tool to be able to help patients have access and even control of it. And this just takes another extent of that control to the patient to where they're able to share that information and know when it's outside of their purview or the unified system we created that is going to the place they intended to go to.
So let's talk. Let's break it down, guys. We've been talking about technology. We've been speaking at fairly high level. At the patient level, what does this mean? I mean, and let's think about this, Chris and Jeff. I'm a patient. I've had multiple doctors over the last several years, had doctors' records going back from pediatrics all the way through high school, in college. And then afterwards, my doctor went out of business and I didn't have any access to my records. Talk to me about how MatchRite connects, I'll use your technical term, longitudinally across the historical records all the way to the current records. And then if I want to share my records with a family member, a doctor, or a provider for an opportunity for research, Jeff, walk them through that in very layman's terms of what MatchRite does to connect disparate medical systems in the history and bring it to the forefront so I can even share and participate in research opportunities.
Yes, I can take the first part of how the unification of that happens is that we connect to the hospital system, hospitals that you go to, they all create a record or a documentation of that visit. And what we do is tap into those hospitals and pull that documentation out and put it in your wallet, so to speak. So if you have 4 or 5 hospitals, all of them have different documentation capabilities. But once that documentation is inside of that hospital's purview, we allow you to plug right into it and pull that information out so you can do what you want with it. Imagine if you had shot records and you take your shot records to your school. Usually, you would have to go to your doctor's office, have that printed out, or have them send an email to you, and you walk that to the school. Our goal was to really put that into a electronic wallet for you. Not only your shot records from one hospital, but maybe there's some immunizations from another hospital. How do we take all those hospital records and put in a unified just portal for you to be able to access that? And then once that's in one spot, you can share that to whoever you decide to share it with. Because once it's in control, then you have the ability to do what you want with it. And what we were trying to do while we stayed outside of the ecosystem or the bureaucratic process of healthcare and not really tie to third-party applications, built this from scratch ourselves. We wanted to be able to have the patient have the freedom to be able to share those records without the dependency on a third-party system to pull that information out. What we did within MatchRite was took the patient, plugged them direct into the source of the records, so took the middleman out and allowed you to unify those records. So now we can move not only in between rural areas and urban areas, but also in between globally, how we can move those records freely without depending on the middleware system that's been built. So we're really excited about how things have evolved. But the goal for us was to get that unification of those medical records in one place and allow the utility of it start to happen. So just this WellWorth project is just one opportunity, but there's so many opportunities for WellWorth to sit inside as financial, so many different groups we can do with that based on this independent model that we built for patient aggregation of records.
So Jeff, I'm just going to ask you a question. Uh, Former collegiate athlete, went to Kansas State University, went to Avila, NAI school, different medical record systems. I was born in a hospital that closed and then they reopened it back up and upgraded it. Disparate medical systems. As if I'm an athlete or if I'm someone that has an acute disease or an issue, medical issue, how does Synovient prepare me to share my information to someone who wanted to do a study on athletes, who wanted to do a study on patients with acute care? How does Synovient participate and make that opportunity realistic for patients?
Great question. Okay. So it's getting control and understanding and connecting people who are looking for data and people who want to share it or will find value by sharing it. So in this example, look, Chris has solved the problem and MatchRite solved the problem of getting you connected to all this data that's all floating all over the place. Great. Now the conversation is, do you want to share it? Well, you probably don't want a binary, do I share it or not? What you want to do is you want to share the records about your leg and what happened to your leg. You might not want to share mental health records if they're in there. So you need some granularity of saying, I want to share vaccination records with this person. I want to share when I broke my leg and I had it in a cast with researchers, and I don't want to share my mental health data. And you need a way to do that doesn't require you to go through 500 little checkboxes, right? It's got to be super easy to do. And then once we've done that, somewhere there's a researcher who's looking for that particular piece of data. So we need to be able to connect that researcher who's looking for that data with you who has that particular piece of data. And then finally, you need to be asked permission. Are you okay with that researcher? Is that somebody that you're okay actually sharing it with? And again, it's got to be an overall simple process. And then the final piece I'll throw in here without getting too technical is you don't want to do any of this if you don't trust the system. How can you trust that once you shared this data, only the data you said can be shared? It's only going to go to the person that you said you would share it with, and it's going to be used in the way that it's going to be shared. So, or the way that you approved. Without going into all the tech details, right? All the technology is there to encapsulate that data, to lock the permissions to it, to do the encryption. And then the final piece is, look, I'm a big believer that money motivates markets in a positive way, right? So,
Yes.
you ought to get paid for that data,
Yeah.
right? It's your data, and the researcher is willing to pay for it. Now, there's systems and connectivity and things that have to happen along the way, and people like Synovient and MatchRite that are going to help you do it, but you should get paid. It's that simple. So, what do I want to share? Who do I want to share it with? Do I trust that it was shared properly? And can I get paid for it?
Jeff, so you just made me think about a movie where Cuba Gooding Jr. was an athlete, and I believe Tom Cruise was his agent. And I remember the catchphrase was "Show me the money." So we're
Mhm.
talking about an $84 billion problem or industry. That's a mind-blowing figure in the healthcare data market. When patients go to their doctors, and I'm going to put this before both of you. When patients go to their doctor, do they have any idea of how their information is being used and can be used?
I'll take that first, and then I get really personal with this. Is that I talk with my son and diagnosed with cancer. What's interesting about that story that really ties into your question is that after he passed away, we're going through his medical record bill. So we're just looking through all the stuff that he was connected with. This might be the first time I actually tell this story, but when I was looking at his medical records, we saw that he was in a research paper in Chicago, right? And I looked him up. He had brainstem glioma, so it's a DIPG and it's a rare disease. But his oncologist had put him in a study in Chicago, and for the life of me, we're getting ready, preparing for his funeral and all this other stuff, whatever. We looked through that and we was like, how did he get there, right? We don't know if they made money off it or not, but his name, Christopher Paul Jones Jr., was sitting there in the research, all the way in Chicago. And we're based in Kansas City. So just that made me realize that we don't know, right? You don't know what they're doing with the records, where it's going, or what they're making money off of. And did we give them permission to do that? I don't know if we signed off anything that allowed them to do that or not, because the significance of it, right? We didn't ever dig any further. But I was just reminded of that when we started these conversations. We're getting ready for this podcast. So it reminded me of that, of what we actually went through. It was we've seen it in real life, real terms. Now today there are mechanisms to be able to track that, and I think there's a lot of things that we can do to put in place, but it's still limited to. And what Synovient does, I can't even explain enough on how important what they do is, right? And I know Jeff will get into that, but to allow a patient to be able to know their record that's being shared and where it's being shared to and who opens it and where it was opened at is so important for the future of where this thing is going. We saw the first problem is trying to unify those records and give you a really robust cliche of records in one place, but the utility of it that Synovient does is so important. And I just take it back to just a personal story with CJ that I had. Thanks. Is
No,
that- yeah, no, so that's all I had to say on that part of it too. Sorry, guys.
I know this is a person, it's very personal for Chris. I've known Chris for at least 12 years. This is a personal story. Everything that he's done is on purpose
Yeah.
and in honor of his son and his son that passed and his sons that are still with him today. So I know his heart. Jeff, how has seeing Chris's heart and his experience led you to say, hey, let's take this experience and turn it into something that could not only honor Chris's son, but honor the other people that may be on this call that have issues or had loved ones that they lost, that they knew that they could, if they knew they could participate in a research or have an opportunity to do that and make money. Talk to us about that and how Synovia helps.
Yeah, I started this with the comment because it gets people's attention that you can make money, right? And I'm all for making money, right? But money doesn't do you a darn bit of good, right? In real life, if you don't have a family and if you don't have your health. So, I started this with I'm a big believer in the power of technology. So let's help connect researchers who are solving tough problems with people who need the insight into that research and where they can get their data. Let's connect people to be able to do amazing things. If you look at that $84 billion market that I talked about, right? It's a market that's growing that's 84 billion by
That's
2032.
a big number, Jeff.
Yeah.
It's a huge number, and it's driven by decentralized trials and also AI health research, right?
Yeah.
Again, how do we take advantage of AI so that it's not working against you, so that it's helping solve your health problems, right? We have a lot of technology we can bring to bear to make people's lives better. So, yes, I want everybody to make money. You asked the question, do people, I don't think people even know that their health data is worth money
Or
for the
they
most
don't.
part. So
No.
we can help solve that, but we can also solve getting people connected so the information goes to the right place. Because there's some things I don't care about money. I care about the health of my family. And if this helps solve that problem, that's what's important to me.
But they both
So
tie together too. I didn't mean to cut you off.
go
But
ahead.
No, go ahead.
But they both tie together because see, the research side of it, right? The health and wellness of a person is dependent on how good the research is. But the research can only be certain good without sample size of testing it. So all that go together, you have to encourage people to be part of the research to help the health and wellness. They all work together in the understanding, and we're in the ecosystem and see it. There's so many people that come to us about data that talk about data because our patients have access to it and they need to be part of these research organizations. But it's important to get people on the research to understand how to treat kids with DIPG or kids with cancer. They need to be able to bring those possibilities in to incentivize the healthy or people that have similar characteristics in their health to be able to test those and get them part of the trials is important for the health. So they all tie together. All of them have to work together, but I don't think everybody really understands how the healthcare ecosystem work. It's not one or the other. It has to be unified together.
So let me think about a scenario. When I go to the doctor, every time that they've asked me, they ask me about my family history.
Yep.
Why is that important? So you think about it. I've had family members that had diabetes. When you start thinking about that, diabetes is something common that a lot of people can relate to. Walk me through how a diabetes patient could benefit from this, seeing doctors and haven't seen a dime, what opportunities are really out there? Because the reason why they're asking the historical data is they're looking out further and thinking about how this person or this patient, what issues are they going to have potentially have. So if I have a history of diabetes and high blood pressure in my family, how can I stave that off? And how could I participate in a research opportunity to, one, help me prevent it, but also pay for some of the bills that I've accumulated along the way?
Yeah. I can at least start on that. So I think, for looking for patients, enrolling patients in these trials, right? There's so many clinical trials and research organizations happening, and some of them are focused on specific regions. I think the administration pushed out obesity and diabetes, and obesity is what they're focused on now. So you're going to see a lot of clinical trials and research focuses on those things too. They're really, really hone in on what this administration is targeting towards. So what research helps do is if you have a family history of medical conditions. I get that all the time when I walk in the doctor's office. I have to say my mom had cancer, my grandma had cancer, my son had cancer, and it's in the family, right? The family legacy tree, so to speak. So they're always looking for certain symptoms they may not look for if I didn't have that history. But in order for them to know how to treat it, they got to have at least some mechanism of patients or research groups that they've targeted that looks like us, right? And to be really transparent, they don't have a lot of research from black and brown groups, right? That's what I'm hearing in a lot of research groups. How do they target those groups too to be able to treat them better? That's just the reality of it too. So be really going into the pockets of where research groups need to enroll patients is really important for us to kind of target that and really get to the brass tacks of where these research facilities are looking for patients at.
So 2 minute drill, gentlemen. 2 minute drill. If I'm a patient, what is my experience going to be like registering for WellWorth? And then are the opportunities real? Am I, Jeff, show me the money. Are patients really going to truly make money? And then let's think about and walk us through that experience to get there. So, Chris, if you can start on the front end for what the
Yeah.
experience is going to be like for a patient registering on MatchRite, and then connecting them to Synovient and then research opportunities. And then, Jeff, bring us home and talk about, is this real?
Yeah, sure. So real just to put it real simplicity in the next 2 minutes. But what we focus on is really aggregating the data as we spoke before, but making it really simplistic for the patient, right? So the way it's set up is you can check a button on WellWorth. You'll see within the MatchRite application. You'll select that button, and once you select that button, it'll ask you what records you want to share. Once you decide on what records that they want to share, not to get technical, what MatchRite does within the system is tag your information and tag the data that you want to share and to keep that information tagged. So once the research opportunity presents itself, we can run it against the information that's been tagged and the patient that's been tagged and say, hey, here's an opportunity for you guys to be able to be part of this clinical trial. And Jeff can and Snowy can take it from there. But once that happens, that's when Snowy can step in. And if we find a clinical trial that match and find a revenue opportunity for you, it's Snowy that does the job to make sure it gets where it needs to go and make sure you understand that when it gets there, that the right person's looking at it.
Thanks, Chris. All right, so I'm gonna give a little a slightly different perspective here, which is let's be realistic. If you go to a store and there's nothing in the store, you're gonna leave and nothing's gonna happen, right? So what really has to happen to make this real? It's real if we make it real, like any social media platform or anything else. There has to be patients that have data. They have to trust it. They have to click a button and say, "Yeah, I'll share it." There have to be researchers who tell us what they're looking for. Give us your hard problems. We have some of the most technologically brilliant people in the world who can help do that connection, both in the healthcare side and on the technology side. And we'll ramp this together. We also need to evangelize it. We need to let people know that we are at a point in history where we can actually solve this problem in a meaningful way. So the simple answer is, look, we're going to ramp patients into the system. We're going to figure out, and we'll do it, and we'll get it in various areas. We're going to ramp researchers into the platform, and we're going to build this. Is it as big as I'd like it to be today? No, of course not, right? But you got to start somewhere, and we are
Yeah.
starting somewhere. And the people that are on this particular Zoom call, people, patients, partners, researchers. Let's have a conversation and let's get the momentum started. If not us, who will do it?
Yeah.
So, Chris, you said MatchRite. I know the first part of this is going online, putting my information in, clicking on this. Where do we go? Where would someone go to start the process to even get MatchRite connected?
Yeah, so you can go on MatchRite Care, www.matchritecare.com, and sign up for our patient app, our patient portal, and log into that the platform, and then pull your medical records in from where the various hospitals that you're located at. Within that profile part of MatchRite, and you put your demographic information in. At the bottom of that, there's a WellWorth engine. Say, would you like to share your information for WellWorth? Once you check that button or highlight that button, it pops up a screen will pop up and say, all right, what data points do you want to share? And the way MatchRite sets up and aggregates your data in eight categories, right? From allergies, labs, medications, doctor visit notes. Any of those eight categories, you can just select one or eight of them or anything in between on what you would like to share. Once you share the information, that's where the tags happen. So we tag and say, Anthony Williams now wants to share his medications and his clinical notes. And once we find a research facility, as Jeff spoke before, that's looking for certain aspects within that, our tool can find a match for you. Match right term, I guess, is what it ties in with it. But we can match you with the clinical trial at that point and let you know that, hey, this clinical trial is available. Here's what it's paying. Here's the opportunity. And then at that point, so know he can kick in and make sure it securely gets to that point now, to where it needs to go.
So Jeff, I'm a researcher. I'm looking for patients and I'm looking for people. How do they get involved with Synovient?
So I think that the straightforward answer right now is you connect with MatchRite, right? We're bringing it all through there. Let's have the conversation about what information you're looking for. Um, and also bring your tough problems, right? So that stuff that you've wanted to do that you've not been able to do for whatever reason. Yeah, let's talk about that, right? And
Yeah.
we will connect you and walk you through the process and we'll make this happen.
So there's a question. First question that we have is, and how can we help? How can we on the call help? And think about you've got 30 plus people on the call. Chris, if you were looking the camera in the eye, and Jeff, you were looking at the people face to face in front of the audience, how can they help? Help answer that question.
It's a network, right? I think this whole thing is a network of people. Your network is connections to people that's looking. You're connected to researchers and you're connected to patients. And some of you on a call might have a relationship with a research facility and say, "Hey, this research facility is looking for to enroll X amount of patients." Or you have a pocket size of patients that you know could be beneficial to certain researchers. It's tell the story of it, right? Tap into your network, and that's what this call is for, is to let you know that we do exist. We're real. We're two great technology companies coming together to put a solution together. Just let everybody know in your network that we're real. Here's what we're doing, and that's the purpose of this: to let you know that WellWorth exists. What we do together is so much more powerful than what we can do independently, and that includes you too, right? It's two companies that come together with an ecosystem of healthcare professionals and just family members that's trying to make a better world for everybody. And I think research is one start. Research is you can make money in this research for sure, but the ecosystem depend on not just the people that's being part of research, but the recipients of that research that's being treated for it too. So the ecosystem of healthcare is important for all of us to come together. And I've been in this journey long enough to know that beyond the technology, I say this a lot, is that we're 50% technology, 50% patient engagement. Is that the patient side is so important of connecting with your network. That's the most powerful thing we can do beyond the technology.
So, we're ramping, and Chris talked about the patients. Let's talk about researchers for just a second, right? This solves problems for researchers. I want to have more conversations with researchers. We can connect you to the data that you're looking for. We think, and I believe we can solve tough problems about finding data that's particularly difficult to find. We have the technology that helps make it even easier to stay compliant throughout the entire process and to find the data quickly from a large disparate group. So these are the kind of questions and kind of conversations we want to have. You can ethically source data and you can do it in volume and you can get to data that you can't get to today. So let's have the conversation. Let's tackle those challenges and let's continue to ramp the system.
Are there any plans to make historical health data available to researchers?
Yeah, so Jeff, I'll let you jump in here too. But I just our phases, and me and Jeff have been talking about this. So what is the end result we see, right? So our goal is to build a WellWorth network and allow research to have a portal, right? To input their at least their requirements, right, for a clinical trial, and then matches against a WellWorth patient. So that's the end goal for us to get into our phases that we're rolling out to. So And that would allow you to have the connection to the patient that has the historical data. So yes, we are really focused on making a historical data available for researchers. The end goal for us is automate this and yet let AI do its thing. Is that when patients come on and say, "I want to share my information for WellWorth," that the research can have a port on the other side that they can sign into, and then they can actually find it and match those patients, and then a patient can be notified. So there is a definitely goal for that for us to get into our final phases of what we're building. So this is the first step, but we're excited about where it can head into.
Jeff, if you can integrate into your response, one of the questions that we just received from Kelly James is how do clinical investigators access this network?
So this goes into the conversation of how do we connect the right people with the right patient data, and do that with, well, keeping the data private for the patient and keeping it anonymous. So that goes to the technology around, how do you search for the data and how do you search for the folks that you want to connect with? And then how do we give them a request that says this clinical person wants to connect with this and wants to connect with that data. So that's the technology we have in the background that is doing the searching and the connecting and keeping the privacy. So the answer is, for now is yes. Can we do that? Yes. I'd like to understand more about the ways in which you're connecting and how you're narrowing down the specific targets, because we can get technologically more honed in how we make those connections and make that go faster. So the answer is we can do that, and let's have that conversation.
Another option too, I didn't mean to cut it, but I think it's important. Jeff, you hit on something, is that because we do relate to the patients, that you can come to us and tell you're seeking out this patient load, and we can push this into pockets of the communities that you're targeting, or the health groups that you're targeting, and really incentivize them to come on to MatchRite. So even if they don't exist in our platform, because we're bi-directional, we can communicate back and forth, is that you can come to us and say, here's the candidates we're looking, here's the requirements for, and we can go on that campaign and go grab that as well.
Yeah, Chris, I want to add one more thing here, just so it's really
Yeah.
clear to folks.
Yeah.
Right. We've emphasized the development and technology around the patient experience as primary, ensuring it's super easy to use, drop dead simple, and makes sense for a patient, gives them all the levels of control. Over on the researcher side, right, the tools and technology by which you find the data, some of that I've used the word conversation because we're building out some of those tools right now, right? I want it to be as simple as you ask a plain English question. I'm looking for people of this type, of this age, to solve this problem, and it vomits back, excuse me, tech term, and it comes back up with a list and does the connections for you. That piece isn't done yet. We're finishing that piece right now. So now is a great time to have the conversation so that we can get that right. But can we do it? Absolutely. Is it as nice and gooey as it is for the patient? No, we prioritize the patient first.
So before we close, I think this is game changing. I believe it, know it, and I feel it's game changing. If I'm interested in signing up, I'm going to put the link in for everyone, people that are interested to sign up for patient at matchritecare.com/sign up. Think about this. What are your goals? What do you envision, Chris, and what did Jeff, what do you envision after this session wraps up? Number of patients, number of researchers. What's the impact that you want to be able to have after this?
Yeah, I think for me, there's millions of patients we can target, right? I think me and Jeff are talking about what is our goals in the next 30, 60 days, what we're targeting. Our goal is really is to get it started, get the conversation started, and see where the market takes us. The market always dictates kind of, the driving of this, but we want to be able to really start getting people that involved, right? And people that can extend into their networks and see where it takes us. In targeting acute condition groups that we have, we can target that. That's kind of our focus on our side. And then Jeff really is helping us on the research side by connecting with those groups. So we have a couple research groups that's really interested in what we're building. This is our first announcement now of how it's moving. But you're right, we really see it as a really game-changing opportunity. And the technology background can be evolved into the future scope of what healthcare really needs and where it makes it a lot more automated. But where we are today is where we want to pilot into these ecosystems of patients and these networks and see where it takes us. But there's a large sample size that we can target. But we're really focused on now is really getting engagement started and come back and put our measurements behind that.
Jeff, put a number to Chris. How many patients do you want to see? How many people do you want to see registered through WellWorth?
Look, I'm going to give you two answers. I'm going to give the CEO answer, then I'm going to give you the human answer.
Yeah.
The CEO answer is I want to see, tens of thousands of patients signing up very, very rapidly. Literally
Right.
every single month, right? And I want to see a queue of researchers beating down our door to where, I have to have the graphical tools because we can't answer the calls fast enough, right? Those are the CEO answers, and they deal with revenue and whatnot. What's the human answer? The human answer is I want my family members to say, boy, instead of just calling me and telling me, boy, I spent a lot on healthcare premiums last year. I want them to say, do you know that I actually made money last year? Someone paid me for my stuff, right? It's really basic, right? I want people that conversation to start. And I want to see an article in the New York Times or on CNN or whatever forum you want saying, hey, a researcher solved some problem for some human that wasn't solvable because they got data and they were able to connect it to AI and do something never able to did before. Somebody somewhere was cured of something they didn't have to suffer for. Those are the things that are going to make all of the work in the background worthwhile on this.
Kelly, if you can come off mic, that would be great.
Thank you, gentlemen and ladies. I wanted to ask a more specific question that deals with because I'm new to this space. I'm a former surgeon that went into clinical research. And one of the biggest problems that since I started my journey in clinical research with a company is actually mining for patients, meaning in order to get patients into research protocol, you have to kind of go out into the community, go
Yeah.
into doctors' offices, their clinics, go into specialist offices and clinics, and you got to go in, and a lot of times you don't even get to talk to the specialist or the provider. You get their secretary and you leave a bunch of information, and there's no guarantee that that information gets to the people that are actually might be benefit from it. Plus, you have the actual providers that now have to engage and say, oh, this patient might fit this research. Let me refer them to this clinical research like they do in cancer research, etc. What I like about your model is that and there's my question, if you can get average citizens to get on your website with their data, and then they put in data points, and people like me as clinical researchers don't have to go into provider's office to mine that data, and they can be compensated and we can compensate on the other end. That's a match made in heaven. So you guys got a fantastic idea, but I was just concerned about the protections that are in place for the subjects that are going to go into research. And I would have concerns about the cost of a person signing up into your system as a patient and as a researcher, because that's where the money is made. If I'm understanding this right. If
You
you
are
guys
correct.
can address that as quickly as possible, I'll sign off and thank you.
Thank you, Kelly, for that correct question. And that's the piece that we've been talking around. Chris and Jeff, if you can talk about after a patient signs up and how we secure the data and hand it off to Synovient, and Synovient then hands it off to a clinical researcher. Can you all speak to that very succinctly and in layman's terms so people understand that this is a secure, ethical process?
And I'll start that one. Just to keep it high level, the patient data is encrypted. Think bank level security. There's multi-factor authentication required. So when the data is shared, it's going to the researcher that it was targeted for and not going anywhere else. In fact, it's so secure. I'm the CEO of Synovient. I can't read your data even if I wanted to. Right? It is locked up very, very tight and is locked up through the entire process. In addition to that, the data is tracked. We know exactly where it went. We knew when it was opened. There were the terms and conditions of how you said that data could be used. The researcher has to say and agree and against those terms again. And all of it, I don't want to go into the deep tech of it, but all of it's put on a private permissioned ledger, which means every time there's a transaction, it's recorded, and it's recorded in such a way that it is legally defensible that this person agreed to buy it for this price. They agreed to use it for this reason. They opened it on Tuesday in this location, right? I mean, it's tracked every single step of the way using a private blockchain. We use blockchain technology. And I'll just throw this out for those that are aware of blockchain. It's private for a reason, because this is not something we want to publish out, right, on Ethereum or out in the public network. And it's immutable, which is a fancy way of saying you can't change it. right? You can't fake the history of what happened and what someone said they would do with it, and we can prove that, right? Insert lots of tech here. So it is highly protected, and it's not only highly protected, it's highly tracked, and it's controlled in a very extensive way.
Chris, anything to add to that?
Yeah, just Jeff hit the nail on the head. But even more so, Kelly, you're exactly the researcher we're targeting, right? You kind of pushed our point is we're trying to bypass the middleman, right? You go into even Moderna and the larger clinical trials, they have to go into facilities to connect with patients. You never know if they get connected. We want to be able to take you directly to the patients. And the patients, a question that Anthony answered earlier was like, is this real? Do you get paid for it? And you answer that question too, is that you can incentivize a patient if you knew where they were. So the technology between our two is really finding the patient, be able to find the patient, allow them to pull in the medical records, then securing those medical records. So when it gets to you, Kelly, that we know you got it, right? And the patient know you have it. And at that point, the connection is made between you and the patient. So we become the middleware, so to speak, to connect between you and the patient, the security and the aggregation of data to get to you, and then the receivership on the patient side to understand that information received by the right person. So you're exactly the person we're talking about. See, it's working, right? So that's part of the network we're talking about building out is having these conversations, and we'll put this out to more. But you're exactly why we do this, why we focus on it, because there's a reason you have the clinical trials that you do there, right? There's certain things you're looking for, and there's certain groups of people that you're trying to connect with that can tie into your research. So we do your investigating for you, right? We can help you with your investigation, so to speak. We can walk into those pockets of location, find those matches for you, so to speak. So we're really excited about you coming on to have that conversation with us because you speak to exactly why we started this.
Hey, Chris, sorry, I wanted just one last quick thing that I forgot to mention from the researcher side, because we've talked a lot about the patients and ensuring they have privacy and transparency. The protecting the researcher and allowing you an ethical source of data and proving that you were allowed to use it and that's how you got it, right, is as important a piece of the equation, right?
Point.
That goes both directions. Thanks, Chris. I just wanted to add it on because I forgot to say it a minute ago.
That's a great point. It is a two-sided equation. Chris and Jeff, I always enjoy seeing you, talking with you both. I learn a lot every time we sit down. I learned something new about Chris today, and I learned even more about technology as we look to move forward in this WellWorth initiative. I want to say thank you both. Without you all, we wouldn't have this opportunity. And I want to say thank you for all the people the participants that signed on today, in spite of the technical issues, moved back over to the platform. Thank you. I'll also say if you're interested in learning more, feel free to check out MatchRite and this WellWorth initiative. Click on the button for WellWorth, and it lays out a little bit more details in a simplistic fashion. And I look forward to having more conversations, but this is an on purpose, on point opportunity for patients. And I know it's near and dear to my heart, and it's near and dear to everybody's heart that's on this call today. So thank you all again. Ebony, thank you for setting up this and coordinating it. Any closing comments or words that you want to say and leave the audience with? 10 words or less?
Thanks for the opportunity to even share what we're building. Thank you for the opportunity to share it. Right, that's key for me.
Yeah, Chris said it. Thank you for giving us your time today, and we look forward to hearing from you and moving this forward together.
Yeah.
Again, thank you all, and take care. Everyone have an amazing day.
Yeah. Thanks, all.
Thanks.